Have you ever had that strange sensation when you are alone at night, maybe looking at the starry sky or simply staring at the ceiling of your room, that something doesn't seem completely real? As if there were a subtle layer of artificiality in the very texture of existence. I'm not talking about conspiracy theories or science fiction movies, but about a deep intuition that many of us experience in moments of quiet. That feeling that behind the curtain of everyday reality, there is something fundamentally different from what our senses show us. Ironically, while the idea that we live in a simulation seems ultra-modern, fueled by our technological advances and by movies like The Matrix, it is actually one of the oldest philosophical intuitions of humanity. More than 2,000 years ago, Plato told us the allegory of the cave, where prisoners chained since birth confuse shadows projected on the wall with reality. For them, the shadows are everything that exists, the very definition of the real. When one of them is freed and sees the outside world, he realizes how limited his previous understanding was. But the most interesting part is when this prisoner returns to tell the others what he discovered, and they consider him crazy. Why? Because for those who remained chained, the shadows continue to be the only possible and conceivable reality. In ancient India, the Advaita Vedanta philosophy developed the concept of Maya, which can be translated roughly as illusion or appearance. According to this tradition, the material world we perceive with our senses is a kind of veil that obscures the true nature of reality. Maya is not exactly a falsehood, but a partial and incomplete truth. It is as if our mind functions like software that processes input data in specific ways, creating a particular interface with the world instead of showing us the world as it actually is. In the 17th century, René Descartes sat by his fireplace and began to question everything he believed he knew, and he came to the possibility that an extremely powerful and cunning evil genius might be dedicating all his effort to deceiving him, making him believe in a world that doesn't exist. What Descartes proposed as a philosophical exercise is today discussed by scientists and philosophers in terms of advanced computational simulations. The contemporary philosopher Nick Bostrom from Oxford University formulated what we call the simulation hypothesis in a more formal way. His argument is fascinating in its simplicity. If we consider that technologically advanced civilizations will eventually develop the ability to create simulations of reality indistinguishable from real reality, and if these civilizations create many of these simulations, then statistically, it is more likely that we are living in one of those countless simulations than in the single base reality. But what makes this discussion so relevant today? Why does the idea of living in a simulation resonate so deeply with so many people in our time? The answer lies in our own technological development and the transformations it has caused in our daily experience. Think about how reality has already changed for you in recent years. Most of us spend hours every day in virtual worlds, whether social networks, video games, digital work environments, or augmented realities. The boundaries between the physical and the virtual are becoming increasingly blurry. Children grow up today interacting with virtual assistants as if they were real people. We form meaningful relationships with people we have never met physically. We cry with fictional characters and are moved by digital landscapes. The virtualization of experience is not just a technological shift, but a profound transformation in the nature of human consciousness. What is interesting is that this transformation is happening in two directions simultaneously. On one hand, we are creating increasingly sophisticated and immersive virtual realities. On the other hand, we are beginning to understand that our perception of what we call objective reality is already in itself a kind of virtual reality generated by our brain. Neuroscientists show us that what we experience as reality is not a direct representation of the external world, but an elaborate construction by the brain. Our senses capture only a tiny fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum and of other physical phenomena. The brain takes these extremely limited data and builds a coherent model of the world. It is as if we lived inside a neurobiological simulation designed not by alien programmers, but by evolution through millions of years. This does not mean that the external world does not exist, but that our access to it is always mediated, always filtered through our perceptual and cognitive systems. To understand this, think about the phenomenon of color. When you look at a red apple, what are you really seeing? The apple itself is not red in any objective sense. Certain molecules on the apple's surface absorb most wavelengths of light and reflect mainly those that our brain interprets as red. Redness does not exist in the physical world, but in the interface between the world and our consciousness. The same goes for sounds, tastes, textures, and even for more abstract concepts like time. The neurologist David Eagleman suggests that different species live in different perception bubbles determined by their sensory systems. For a bat, the world is a symphony of echoes. For a snake, it is a heat map. For a bee, ultraviolet flowers shine like neon signs. None of these perceptions is more true than the others. They are just different interfaces with the same underlying reality. So are we trapped in this neurobiological simulation with no way out? Well, yes and no. We cannot escape the fundamental limits of human perception, just as we cannot see X-rays or detect magnetic fields without technology. But we can expand our awareness of these limits, and that alone is already a form of freedom. When we understand that our experience of reality is constructed, we gain a certain critical distance from it. We begin to perceive the structures, narratives, and filters that shape our perception. And this is where we reach an even deeper layer of simulation, one that is not neurobiological, but cultural and social. Beyond the perceptual limits imposed by our biological hardware, there are the conceptual limitations imposed by our cultural software. Think about how your worldview is shaped by the language you speak, the stories you heard since childhood, the institutions you trust, the algorithms that select the information that reaches you. I need to stop for a moment and ask you directly, which aspect of this technological future we are discussing awakens the most fear or apprehension in you? Do you lie down at night thinking about this too? I know that we often keep these concerns to ourselves, perhaps out of fear of seeming paranoid or technophobic in a world that celebrates every new innovation without questioning. But your worries are valid and probably shared by more people than you imagine. Share in the comments. My biggest fear about our technological future is your voice can help create a space where we can honestly discuss these collective fears instead of suppressing them. And perhaps by naming these fears together, we can begin to imagine ways to face them. The writer David Foster Wallace once told a parable about two young fish swimming when they meet an older fish swimming in the opposite direction. The older fish waves and says, "Good morning, boys, how's the water?" The two young fish swim on for a while until eventually one looks at the other and asks, "What the hell is water?" Wallace's point is that the most obvious and important realities are often the hardest to see and talk about. Water for fish, like culture for us humans, is so omnipresent that it becomes invisible. Cultural simulations are particularly powerful because they present themselves not as constructions, but as the very nature of things. When an economic system is presented as the natural laws of the economy, when a social hierarchy is justified as just the natural order, when a political arrangement is described as the only viable system, we are facing cultural simulations disguised as objective reality. The historian Yuval Noah Harari calls these cultural simulations imagined orders. In his book Sapiens, he argues that the unique human ability to collectively believe in fictions, from gods and nations to corporations and money, is what allowed us to cooperate on a large scale and dominate the planet. These imagined orders are not lies in the common sense, because they function precisely because large groups of people believe in them simultaneously and guide their actions according to that belief. Money, for example, has no intrinsic value. A 100 real banknote is just a piece of colored paper. Its value exists only because we collectively agree that it exists because we share this consensual hallucination. The same goes for national borders, which do not physically exist in the landscape, but which millions of people are willing to kill and die to defend. Or for corporations, which are purely legal entities, juridical fictions, that nevertheless have rights, can own property, and can outlive all their original members. These cultural simulations or imagined orders are not inherently good or bad. They are social technologies that allowed an unprecedented level of cooperation between strangers. Without these shared fictions, we would be limited to small groups based on direct personal contact, like our primate cousins. However, it is also true that many of these cultural simulations have served to justify and perpetuate systems of oppression, exploitation, and environmental destruction. Slavery, for example, was justified for centuries by cultural simulations about the supposed natural inferiority of certain human groups. Contemporary consumerism is maintained by a cultural simulation that equates material consumption with happiness, status, and meaning, despite all scientific evidence to the contrary. The climate crisis is partly the result of a cultural simulation that positions humans as separate from nature with the right to exploit it without limits. So how do we leave the matrix of these cultural simulations? The first step is the same that Morpheus offered Neo: awareness. Recognizing that many of the structures we consider natural, inevitable, or immutable are actually contingent cultural constructions. This does not make them less real in their effects, but it opens the possibility of imagining and building them differently. The clearest example of this is the transformation of social attitudes toward issues such as race, gender, sexuality, and civil rights in recent decades. Structures of oppression that once seemed fixed and natural to previous generations were exposed as social constructions and in many cases significantly reshaped, although the work is far from complete. But there is a second, deeper level of liberation, which involves not only intellectually recognizing the constructed nature of social reality, but directly experiencing the possibility of other ways of being and perceiving. This is where contemplative practices from various traditions come into play. Mindfulness meditation, for example, trains attention to observe how thoughts, emotions, and sensations arise and pass in consciousness without fully identifying with them. This simple practice can create a space of freedom between stimulus and response, between cultural conditioning and action. Anthropologists, artists, and travelers have long reported how immersion in radically different cultures can defamiliarize aspects of one's own culture that once seemed natural and inevitable. Culture shock, in this sense, can be a pathway out of the simulation. The same is true for profound aesthetic experiences, which can momentarily suspend our habitual constructions of reality and open us to other possibilities of perception and meaning. Interestingly, the very technologies that are intensifying our experience of simulated realities can also offer pathways out of them. Virtual reality, for example, has the potential not only to trap us in more convincing simulations, but also to help us recognize how much our normal perception is already mediated and constructed. By experiencing different virtual realities, we may develop a more fluid and flexible understanding of perception itself. And there is an even more radical perspective suggested by contemplative traditions and increasingly explored by neuroscience and contemporary philosophy of mind. The idea that the very sense of a separate and autonomous self is a kind of simulation, not an external simulation imposed on us, but a construction generated moment by the brain and the mind. Neuroscientist Anil Seth suggests that the sense of being a self is closely linked to the model the brain builds of the body and its needs. In this view, self-awareness is not a stable thing or an essence, but a continuous process of self-modeling that the brain performs to better regulate the organism in its environment. It is a useful simulation, but still a simulation. Buddhist traditions, in particular, have developed sophisticated analyses and contemplative practices focused on directly investigating this constructed nature of the self. Through practices such as vipassana meditation, practitioners are encouraged to carefully observe the mental and bodily processes that we normally identify as self and to notice how they are actually impermanent, interconnected, and without a fixed central essence. This perspective does not lead to nihilism or denial of lived experience, but to a radical reconfiguration of the relationship with that experience. If the self is not a separate and permanent entity, but a process in constant flow, interconnected with everything else, then many of the anxieties, fears, and conflicts based on defending this separate self lose their foundation. The suffering associated with trying to maintain a fixed sense of identity in a world of constant change can be relieved. Here it is worth noting that we are not talking only about abstract philosophy, but about empirically verified results. Research in contemplative neuroscience documents how regular meditation practices can lead to significant reductions in stress, anxiety, and depression, as well as increases in well-being, attention, and prosocial behavior. Something deeply transformative seems to happen when we begin to relax our rigid adherence to the model of the separate self. So, in what sense can we leave the simulation? Clearly, we cannot fully escape the limitations of our human perceptual biology, nor completely transcend our cultural and historical conditions. There is no red pill that instantly transports us to the true reality behind appearances. But perhaps this very quest for a complete escape is a product of the simulation we want to transcend, based on a dualistic conception that separates appearance and reality, simulation and authenticity, prison and freedom. What if freedom does not lie in completely exiting the simulation, but in developing a more conscious, creative, and compassionate relationship with it? The German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, long before contemporary digital metaphors, had already suggested something similar. For him, there is no ultimate truth behind interpretations, only interpretations that are more or less useful, more or less conducive to life and flourishing. The question is not to fully escape fictions, but to recognize them as fictions and then ask, what kinds of fictions do we want to create together? What kinds of shared realities do we want to inhabit? This brings us to the role of art, narrative, and imagination in transforming reality. If we accept that significant aspects of our social reality are cultural simulations based on shared stories, then new stories have the potential to create new realities. It's no coincidence that all transformative social movements have been at their core storytellers, offering alternative narratives about who we are, where we come from, and where we can go. Martin Luther King Jr. did not merely present a political analysis or set of demands, but articulated a powerful dream that would reshape the American imagination. Contemporary environmental movements are not only presenting scientific data, but trying to reshape our relationship with the natural world, shifting from a narrative of domination to one of interconnection and care. The power of these new narratives does not lie in their correspondence to some external objective reality, but in their ability to mobilize collective imagination and action to create new possible worlds. In this sense, artists, writers, and storytellers are not merely describing the world, but actively participating in its creation. Technology also has a complex and ambiguous role in this dynamic. On one hand, digital technologies have greatly expanded the reach of dominant cultural simulations, allowing narratives of consumerism, individualism, and unlimited growth to be transmitted globally with unprecedented effectiveness. On the other hand, these same technologies have democratized the production of narratives, allowing previously marginalized voices to share alternative stories and build communities around them. Social networks are simultaneously instruments of social control through algorithmic manipulation and potential spaces for resistance, solidarity, and collective reimagination. Artificial intelligence is being used both to reinforce existing biases and concentrate power, and to imagine alternative futures and democratize knowledge. Technology itself does not determine outcomes. What matters are the stories we tell through it and with it. And this brings us back to the original question: is it possible to escape the matrix? The answer depends crucially on how we understand both the matrix and the escape. If the matrix is understood as the set of cultural simulations that shape our collective experience, and escape means recognizing them as constructions and consciously participating in their reformulation, then yes, a form of liberation is possible. This liberation is not a final state to be achieved, but a continuous process of awakening, questioning, and recreating. It is not a solitary journey, but a collective one. It is not about escaping shared reality, but transforming it so that it more fully reflects our deepest values and highest aspirations. A crucial aspect of this journey is developing what we might call reality literacy, or cultural metacognition, the ability to recognize how our perceptions, beliefs, and values are shaped by broader cultural, technological, and economic systems. Just as media literacy helps us become more critical consumers of information, this reality literacy can help us more consciously navigate the multiple layers of simulation that make up our experience. This critical awareness need not lead to cynicism or disillusionment. On the contrary, it can open space for a conscious re-enchantment of the world. If we understand that many aspects of social reality are collective constructions, this means we have the collective power to construct them differently in ways more aligned with our deepest values and the flourishing of all life. In the words of philosopher Owen Flanagan, we can aspire to an ecology of freedom, not an absolute freedom from the limitations of biology, culture, or history, but a situated and relational freedom that recognizes our belonging to larger systems, while preserving space for meaningful agency within them. This vision of freedom is not about transcending all limitations, but about developing a more conscious and creative relationship with them. It is not about escaping reality, but about participating more fully in its ongoing co-creation. It is not about reaching some ultimate truth behind appearances, but about cultivating a more honest, ethical, and compassionate relationship with appearances as such. Ultimately, the question may not be whether reality is a simulation, but what kind of simulation we want it to be. What kinds of stories do we want to inhabit together? What kinds of worlds do we want to create for ourselves and for future generations? If these reflections touched on something you've been feeling, but perhaps have not found words to express, know that you are not alone. By subscribing to the channel, you will connect with a growing community of people who share your concerns and your desire for a deeper understanding of the philosophical challenges of our time. Each week, we gather here to explore together the great questions that define our era and to seek not only understanding, but also wiser ways of living amid the transformations we are witnessing This is not just a channel, but a space for dialogue and collective growth. Join us on this ongoing journey. Subscribe so we can continue this essential conversation about how to live with more wisdom and purpose in a world that often leaves us disoriented and divided. As we continue to navigate the many layers of simulation that make up our modern experience, perhaps true liberation does not lie in finding a definitive exit, but in developing a more conscious, ethical, and creative relationship with the simulations we inhabit. It is not so much a matter of leaving the matrix, but of learning to collectively reprogram it according to higher values of compassion, justice, sustainability, and shared flourishing. This is a journey that paradoxically takes us not out of reality, but more deeply into it, into a richer appreciation of its complexity, interconnection, and potential for transformation. In the end, we may discover that reality is not so much a simulation to be transcended, but a mystery to be lived, a gift to be received, and a collective creation to be responsibly cultivated. It's just our fortune and misfortune as a species that we think in stories. So if you want to make a point, you have to take the messiness of reality and cast it as a story, otherwise people don't understand. And we have now all these discussions about, for example, climate change. How to make the general public understand what is happening, what is the enormity of the crisis we are facing, what is the evidence supporting it, what should we do? The problem is scientists, including climate scientists, they think in facts, in numbers, in statistics, in equations, in graphs, all the things that make most people fall asleep or just not get it. If you really want to make the public understand climate change, you need a story.
Another story is about Tiberius, the Roman Emperor Tiberius. He was afraid to be assassinated, like all emperors. Unfortunately for him, the commander of his bodyguard, Sejanus, was an extremely ambitious person also. Sejanus convinced Tiberius to move to live on the small island of Capri, telling Tiberius that there he will be safer, because it would be easier to protect him against assassins and spies and so forth. And Tiberius moved to live in Capri. But then Sejanus controlled all the information that reached the emperor. It was very easy for him. But nobody could get to Capri. No letter could reach the emperor unless it passed through the hands of the bodyguards. And Sejanus became the real ruler of the Roman Empire because he controlled all the information reaching Tiberius. And if somebody tried to make a move against him, he could always tell Tiberius that this person was conspiring against him or was a threat and should be eliminated. And to some extent, this is true of all of us. All of us can find ourselves isolated on an island, maybe a digital island, and whoever controls the information that reaches our ears and eyes control us.
Yuval, thank you so much for coming to KU University.
Thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be here.
We only have 30 minutes, so I'm going to bombard you with questions.
Absolutely.
So first question to you. When I assumed the position of the president of KU University, let's say 4 years ago, the university library set up a shelf displaying must-read books recommended by president. And your book, 21 Lessons, occupied the center of the shelf.
Thank you.
That was 6 years ago. You published your 21 Lessons, and there you mentioned 3 big global threats. 1, nuclear warfare, of course including Putin's Russia, and 2, uncontrolled advancement of the biotechnology, including genome editing affecting humans itself, and 3, IT or information networks and AI. In a way, it is unchecked. So those are the three threats you mentioned. But for Nexus, you concentrated on IT networks, information networks, and AI only. Could you explain to me the reason behind this?
Well, if you compare AI and biotechnology, the most obvious thing is that AI just moves so much faster. Biotechnology can also change the world in a dramatic way, but it takes much, much longer because biology is much slower. Like if you make a change to the human genome, let's say to the genome of a human baby, and you want to know what the effects are and how to make an even bigger change in the future, you need to wait 20, 30, 40 years to see what is the impact of the new genetic material, the new genetic code on human behavior, human intelligence, human psychology. So a generation in biotechnology, when it comes to humans, is maybe 20 or 30 years. In AI, it could be just a few days. Digital evolution is moving millions of times faster than organic evolution. So without belittling the potential dangers and also opportunities of biotechnology, AI is just much, much faster. And with regard, when comparing AI, say, to the threat of nuclear war, here the reason to focus on AI are actually two reasons. First of all, nuclear war has no upside. So it has no supporters. Everybody, it's a huge, huge threat, especially in today's world, when we see that countries like Russia are just completely disregarding the biggest taboos of the international system. Since 1945, the biggest taboo of the international system was that a strong country cannot just invade and try to conquer and destroy a weaker country. And now this is broken. So the danger is huge, but at least everybody understands the danger. There are no winners in a nuclear war. With AI, it's a much more complicated challenge because there is a huge positive potential, and people find it very difficult to understand what the threats are. Ever since the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it was at least clear to humans what is the danger of nuclear technology. You don't need long explanations. With AI, it's difficult to grasp the danger because it's really an alien threat. The key problem with AI is not that it is evil. It's not evil. The key problem is that it is alien. It is an intelligence which could be superhuman in many ways, but it's not human, it's not organic. A lot of people ask, when will AI reach human-level intelligence? The answer is never, because it's not like us at all. It's like asking, when will airplanes reach bird-level flight? Never. Airplanes are just not like birds. They fly in a different way. So AI will surpass human intelligence, but it will be inherently alien. So it's very difficult to predict how it will develop and what the consequences will be. I'll say one more thing, and that's maybe the most important thing for everybody to understand about AI is that it is not a tool, it is an agent. It's the first technology we have ever created which is an agent and not a tool. An atom bomb or a nuclear reactor, the peaceful nuclear reactor that produces electricity, this is a tool in our hands. We decide what to do with it. Humans decide, we will use nuclear technology to produce electricity and not to destroy city. We make the decision. The reactor itself cannot make any decision. And of course, it cannot invent the next generation of reactors or of bombs. Only humans, until now, could make decisions and could invent new ideas. AI is the first technology that can do that without our help, without our intervention. AI can make decisions by itself. An AI weapon doesn't need human beings to tell it what to do. It can decide by itself what to bomb. And AI can even invent new weapons and new military strategies. It has, again, enormous positive potential. It can invent new medicines, new treatments for cancer. It has enormous negative potential. So this is why I chose to focus in this book only on the history of information technology, because I think at the present moment, it's the biggest challenge we face. Actually, in many ways, it's the biggest challenge that humanity faced in its history, because for thousands of years, we ruled the planet. Nothing on Earth could compete with us in intelligence, in the ability to invent new things. Now there is something on the planet, there is something on Earth, which very soon, maybe within a few years, will surpass us in intelligence, will be able to make decisions about our lives, will be able to invent new everything from medicines to weapons. And that's the biggest challenge.
You just said that maybe in a few years, but as early as 2015, you published a book, Homo Deus, History of Tomorrow, or Future. There you also warned and actually concentrated on information technology, information networks. How do you see, how is your thought right now compared to your thought, let's say 2015, when you wrote Homo Deus? It's been 10 years.
Yeah,
and you started as a historian and medieval military experts, and now you're focusing on, information networks and AI. Could you compare these, your development in past 10 years?
Yeah, I think 10 years ago when I wrote Homo Deus, all this talk about, very few people were talking about AI at the time. You had some people of course, in the computer science departments. You had people in the leading corporations, like Google and Microsoft, who already understood what was happening. And you had a few philosophers like Nick Bostrom, who published Superintelligence in 2014. But when I wrote Homo Deus, it felt like, we are talking about something that maybe will happen in hundreds of years, some philosophical speculations with very little immediate practical implications for our lives. Now it's all around us, and the pace of development is simply astounding. Already back then there were people like Ray Kurzweil also, who said that there will be AGI, artificial general intelligence, able to surpass human beings in all fields, not just a narrow field like playing chess or driving a car, but in all fields, they say by the end of the 2020s, by 2029. And even to me, when I read what Ray Kurzweil wrote, I thought, he's exaggerating. I can't be by 2029. Now Ray Kurzweil is still saying 2029, and he's considered one of the more conservative thinkers. Like you listen to the people who had the development effort in corporations in the US, in China. They were talking within a year, within 5 years, we'll have AGI. So it sped up dramatically. The other thing is that all hopes of regulating this, of reaching some kind of agreement about this, seem now extremely naive. Certainly since the last US elections, I think really all hope of reaching a global agreement on how to manage the risk of AI development is gone. the big paradox of the AI revolution. I think at the heart of the AI revolution, there is a big paradox. And it's a paradox of trust. When you talk with the people who lead the AI revolution, the people who run companies like OpenAI, like Microsoft, like Tencent, like Baidu, when you talk with the leading politicians, I ask them two questions always.
Okay.
The first question I ask is, why are you moving so fast? Okay, yes, I understand there is enormous positive potential, but there are also risks. Let's slow down a little to give human society the time. Humans are extremely adaptive creatures. We can adapt to the AI age, but we just need time. Just give us a bit more time. And they all say the same thing. We understand there are huge risks as big as human extinction. We understand this. We would like to slow down, but we can't. Because if we slow down and our competitors in the other company, in the other country, they don't slow down, they will win the race. And the most ruthless people will then dominate the world because they will have this wonderful technology, AI. So because we cannot trust the other humans, we must move faster. And then I ask the second question, do you think you could trust the super intelligent AIs you are developing? And they say yes. The same people who, like a minute ago, told me we cannot trust the other humans, suddenly they become extremely trustworthy and they say, but we would be able to trust the AIs. And this is really on the border of insanity. Because, you know, with humans, I understand why it's difficult to trust the other humans. But we have thousands of years of experience with other human beings. We understand their psychology, their motivation. We know a lot about the human craving for power, but we also understand the mechanisms to check the pursuit of power. And over thousands of years, humans have developed ways to learn to trust each other. And you now have, 10,000 years ago, or 100,000 years ago, humans lived in tiny bands of a few dozen individuals, couldn't trust anybody outside their band. Now you have nations like Japan with hundreds of millions of citizens that can trust each other. The global trade network connects all 8 billion people on the planet. The food we eat, the clothes we wear, the medicine that protect us is often produced by strangers on the other side of the planet. So yes, there's still a huge problem how to trust other people, but we have experience in doing that. We have zero experience with super intelligent AIs. We have no idea what kind of goals and tricks they might develop. We have no idea what happens when you have millions and millions of super intelligent AIs interacting with each other and with millions of human beings. AI is not one single big computer somewhere. It's going to be, think about it as a wave of immigration sweeping over the entire world. You now have all these populist parties that are so afraid of immigrants. Oh, the immigrants will come. The immigrants will take our jobs. The immigrants they have different ideas about culture. They will take over our country. They will change our culture. We are so afraid. AI is a wave of millions of alien immigrants that will take people's jobs, that will have very, very different ideas about how to run societies, that could take over countries. This is should frighten people much more. And so this is the big paradox. And the big question is, how do you build trust between humans before we develop super intelligent AI?
So you talk about trust between human and, let's say autonomous AI or
AI agents.
AI agents, yes. But also the trust between so-called elite and so-called, normal citizen, is division is widening.
Yeah.
And of course, the populist and or also dictator you mentioned in Nexus that they try to take advantage of AI as an agent, not as an agent, but as a tool right now.
Yeah.
But then consequence is going to be unknown because, as you mentioned. So how do you see the trust between or division between so-called elite and sort of populist kind of generation? Because your books is probably read mostly by so-called elite side, but I'm wondering how much this book is influencing general public, because that's what we need. You're trying to bridge between those those two divided group of people to narrowing the division. So.
Well, like many divisions that we invent in our minds, this division also is a false dichotomy, like the elite and the people. You have the richest person in the world, Elon Musk, and a group of other billionaires, like Donald Trump, who is a billionaire, claiming that they are against elites. If you're not an elite, so what is an elite? Like the richest person in the world is not an elite. All these billionaires who are now running the US government, they are not elites. Why? I mean, the word elite has become kind of a negative term that you just put on your political rivals. The fact is that every human group has an elite. I mean, you cannot run any group of people, not even a football club. You always have people who are more talented in this or have more power or more influence. This is just the nature of human society. The problem is not with the existence of elite. The main question to ask, is it a serving elite or is it a self-serving elite?
That's true.
If you have a group of people from a small group of friends all the way to an entire country or the whole planet, and the people who has the most influence there, they use their power only for their own self-benefit, this is a very bad situation. The ideal is that the people who have more talent in a particular field or more influence or more power, they use it for the benefit of society. The fantasy of we can just create a society without any elite, that never works. It's always a trick of some people to gain power for themselves. The biggest experiment in creating a completely equal society without any elite was communism, and we all know where this led to. So is North Korea a society without any elite? Maybe because there is just one.
Yes.
But this is not what we should be aiming towards. I think especially for an institution like this, and for all universities, the purpose is not to destroy elites or break down all barriers between this group. The purpose is to create a serving elite.
Yes.
That people who they have more talent in a particular field, they have more influence in that particular field, and they use their talents and their power not just for their personal benefit, but for the benefit of all. That should be the aim.
So you also, in Nexus, you also talk about division between those who live in cyberspace versus physical space. And more people are now living in cyberspace and just following, let's say, tweets under 280 characters and X and so on. How should educational institutions like us and also K-12, secondary, primary education should tackle the challenge of having younger generation be able to read this size book, thought-provoking, books that makes us think and we'll also discuss. But that's getting more and more difficult for us. So what's the role of education to basically maintain the intellectual ability of human being?
Yeah, I mean, in previous eras, educational institutions focused on providing people with information because information was scarce. It was a scarce commodity. Maybe you live in a distant town, and there is just one library in the town with just 100 books. So just getting a book was very difficult. Now it's exactly the opposite. People don't need more information. We are flooded by enormous amounts of information. And the main thing to understand is that information isn't truth. The truth is a very rare subset of information. If you think about all the information in the world, so the truth is a very, very small percentage of that. Most information is junk. Most information is fiction and fantasy and lies and propaganda and so forth. And there is it's easy to understand why. The truth is costly, whereas fiction is cheap. If you want to write a truthful account of anything, you need to do research. You need to spend time on analyzing it, on fact-checking it. It takes time and effort and money. Fiction is very cheap. You just write anything that comes up in your mind, very cheap. Secondly, the truth tends to be complicated because reality is complicated. Like if you want to write an account about quantum physics, it's complicated. Whereas people usually don't like complicated narratives. They want simple stories. Yes. And again, fiction can be made as simple as you would like it to be because you just invent it. And finally, the truth is often painful. Not always, but some parts of reality are uncomfortable. You know, from the level of individual, this is why people go to therapy, because if it was everything about me was so pleasant and fun, I wouldn't need a therapist to help me acknowledge the painful memories or painful patterns that I have inside myself. And this is true all the way to entire nations that often don't want to recognize some painful parts of their history or of their society. So the truth is sometimes painful. Fiction can be made as flattering as you would like it to be. So in this competition between costly and complicated and painful truth and cheap, simple, attractive fiction, fiction wins. And the world is flooded by enormous amounts of fiction. The job, the task of institutions like universities, like newspapers, is not just to provide people with more information. They have too much of it. To provide them with a method to find these rare gems of truth inside the ocean of information and to know how to tell the difference. So, you know, as a historian, the main thing I teach my students in history class is not facts about the past. Oh, this king won that battle against that king in that year. They don't need me. They can just Google it. What they still need to learn in history department is how do I tell the difference between a reliable historical source and an unreliable source? A source may be something I just read today on the internet. How do I know if I can trust this TikTok video or not? A source can be something from the Middle Ages. You find a document from 1,000 years ago. How do you know the king wrote that he won this battle? How do you know whether to believe? Because people lied also 1,000 years ago, not just today. So that's the main question. And that's in every scientific discipline, of course, it's a bit different. But the key question is not about getting more information. It's about how do we tell the difference between reliable and unreliable information. The same thing in experiments, in physics or in chemistry. How do I know whether this experiment was ran correctly and I can trust the outcome, or there was some problem and I shouldn't trust it?
You said truth can sometimes be painful. And indeed, reading Nexus brought me, a wide variety of emotions. But at the same time, it gave me hope that it's not too late. And there's a, human nature that is, that can, ability to self-correct and also ability to cooperate, work together. If only we had time, I suppose, right? Before AI gets somewhere else. there should be a way for us to cope with this. And this is why, as Professor Yamamoto stated, we established a so-called cross-dignity center, where we, humanity and also social science professors, academicians get together to tackle exactly that. So if you were a research scientist at our cross-dignity center, oh, by the way, you're welcome to join us anytime.
Thank you.
What would be the research topic of yours?
How to build trust between humans. I think that is the most urgent, because what we see now in the world is a collapse of human trust, exactly when we need it most. The biggest danger in the world still is not AI. It's the distrust between humans. If humans could trust each other and cooperate, we could still devise ways to develop AI in a safe way. It's the distrust between humans that make the AI revolution so dangerous. So I would focus on that. It's not too late to build enough trust between human beings to keep AI under control.
And what would be your approach to tackle this challenge of, building trust?
I think we need input, and this is why an interdisciplinary center is the ideal place to do it, because no single discipline can tackle this question by itself. You need input from biology and psychology, because we are still animals. You need to understand our animal inheritance. And you can learn a lot from how chimpanzees, for instance, build trust or fail to build trust between themselves to understand how humans function. You need the input, from economics, of course, from computer science, because today all social systems are based on the new information technology. So a lot of lessons about how to build trust between humans that were very successful until, say, 10, 20 years ago are now obsolete. Because now humans communicate through computers. And if we don't understand this new technology that is now mediating between, and there is a huge discussion about what has caused this collapse of human trust over the last 10 or 20 years. It's a paradox, because humanity is in the best condition we were ever in. You look at most of the kind of hard data, things like child mortality, like disease, like famine, it all goes down. We are in the best situation ever, and yet people are so angry and so frustrated and can't talk with each other. What happened? What happened is that a new technology came between humans. And now most human communication is mediated by a non-human agent, which is creating havoc in the world. So to rebuild trust, we can't go back. We can't say, okay, let's just throw away all the smartphones and computers. It won't work. So we need to relearn how to build trust between masses of people with this mediation of information technology.
Your book is so readable. It's very different from academic writing, so to say. Do you do this intentionally?
Absolutely. I mean, I see my job as building a bridge between the world of academic studies, where mostly experts talk with other experts in a language that is very difficult for lay people without academic background to access. So I try to take the most up-to-date theories and models and findings of the academic and scientific community and relay it, explain it in a way that will be easily accessible, say, even to high school students or to any person who wants to understand what is this AI revolution. I never studied computers. I don't want to have all these graphs and equations. Can I understand in a simple language what is the AI revolution and what is the history of information? So this was the aim of writing the book.
And how do you feel that your effort is penetrating into cyberspace, those who live in cyberspace?
It's very difficult to know. I mean, you write a book, you release it to the world.
Yeah.
What impact it will actually have on people, very difficult to know. We have, I mean, one of the things that helps the book is that it's not only me. My husband and I established a social impact company at the same time that 10 years ago that Homo Deus was published. And I'm in charge of writing the books, and he is in charge of all the business side. And we have a team of 20 people working for us. One of them is here in Tokyo. And with social media accounts and trying to take the ideas of the book and translate them into more and more media so they could reach more and more people. And whether this will be enough, we don't know. I mean, we feel that each person has some little agency in the world. We try to do what we can and trust other people to do what they can. Yes. Nobody can carry the entire world just on their shoulders. If enough people do what they can in their small field of activity, I think we'll be okay.
Nexus just came out in Japanese, so that's why you're here.
Yeah.
But Nexus original version came out last year.
Yeah, in September in English.
September. How do you see the development, especially the Trump administration started, and there are so many developments globally.
So far, it's been very worrying, again, because of the accelerating erosion of trust within societies and between societies. We see that the international order is collapsing. Again, the international order established after the Second World War, its most important taboo, its most important rule was that strong countries cannot just invade and conquer weaker countries. And this was in complete opposite to thousands of years of previous history, when, for thousands of years, this was the ordinary thing, that a stronger country would just invade and conquer its neighbors and establish a bigger country, an empire. And humanity enjoyed in the early 21st century the most peaceful and prosperous era in its history, largely because this taboo was maintained. There were conflicts in parts of the world. I come from the Middle East, I come from Israel, I know this perfectly well. It was not a perfect order, but it was better than anything that existed previously. You could see it most easily in the budgets of governments. For most of history, more than 50% of the budget of every king and shogun and emperor was on the military. Soldiers, warships, castles, this was the main government expenditure. In the early 21st century, average government expenditure on the military went down to about 6% or 7%. This amazing achievement. About 10% went to healthcare. It was the first time in human history that governments all over the world spent more on healthcare than on the military. This is now going in reverse. As a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and of other developments, you see defense budgets skyrocket, and this will come at the expense of healthcare and education. And frankly, the Trump administration is not making things any better. You listen to Trump blaming Ukraine for the war, and it's very clear that what he has in mind is a world order in which the proper thing is for the weak to obey the strong.
Right.
And if the weak refuse to obey the strong, the weak are to blame for the resulting conflict.
Right.
And you see it like all over. It threatens that the United States now wants to conquer Greenland. Now, if Denmark and Greenland say, but we don't want to be part of the US, and as a result there is a war, in Trump's mind, who is to blame for that? Denmark is to blame. Because the United States is strong, you must obey the strong, If you don't obey the strong and there is a war, the weak are to blame. They should have obeyed the strong. Now, this kind of worldview, this kind of logic will bring all humankind back to a constant state of war. And in this situation, it's not just healthcare and education budgets that will go down. Any chance of regulating AI, it will not be possible, because every country will say, we have to win the AI race. We are not going to do anything that might slow us down, and then the other side wins, and then they are the strong, and we have to obey them.
Yet, your book gives us a hope.
Again, as long as we haven't reached that point,
Right.
there is still hope. And if enough people do the right thing in the coming months and years, humanity will still be okay.
Thank you so much. Time's up, she said. So, thank you so much, Yuval. This has been so wonderful, and so we're so delighted to have you. So thank you so much. We stay here to receive more questions.
Harari 教授、塾長ありがとうございました。Thank you, Professor Harari and President. では続けて、塾生との質疑応答の時間に入らせていただきます。
Thank you for great discussion. I was really impressed as a co-director of the Cross Dignity Center. Now I'm thinking about a new project in the Cross Dignity Center, which is related to how to trust human beings. Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm going to speak in Japanese for Japanese students and Japanese reporters. And due to editing issues of news organizations, so yeah, I'd like you to ask a question in Japanese. Okay. Yeah, I know you students can speak English fluently, but yeah, editing issue. Thank you. Okay. じゃあ、日本語を喋ります。ご質問、いろいろ学生じゃない方もたくさん来ていただいていますけれども、今回この後学生との対話の時間にしたいと思っておりますので、学生からの質問を受け付けたいと思います。それではいかがでしょうか。早速ですが。じゃあ、そちらの方お願いできますか。はい、すみません。
非常に示唆に富んだディスカッションありがとうございました。2点質問させていただきたいんですけれども、まず1点目が、先ほどおっしゃられていたようにAI が台頭して AI が独自にネットワークを築く一方で人間の間では非常に深刻な分裂が生じているっていう現状認識をされていて、私もそれは非常に同意するところであります。でそのそういった状態においてAI を通したりアルゴリズムを通して会話をすることによってより分裂が深まっていっていると思うんですけれども、それによって我々がこれまで広く共有していたナラティブも分裂していっているように思います。でそうした分裂した状況の中でサピエンス全史以降ハラリさんが繰り返し論ってきたサピエンスの特有の集団性を確立して維持する役割を果たしてきた共同主観的現実というのは今後の社会においてどのような役割を果たすと考えているでしょうか。お聞かせください。
So yes, our special ability as Homo sapiens is to organize very large cooperation between thousands and millions of billions of people through shared stories, through shared narratives, not just about gods and religions, but also in the economy. Like the most successful story ever invented is probably money. That it's the only story that everybody believes. Not everybody believes in God, in this God or that God, but even people who completely disagree about other things. You know, you look at the United States, Republicans and Democrats cannot agree about anything except the dollar. If a Republican comes with $1, the Democrat will accept it and sell whatever it is, bread or gasoline, and vice versa. Even this is now under threat with cryptocurrency.
Yes.
Because there are the people who say, we don't want the dollar, we want crypto. And this is a very important indication because dollar is human currency. It's produced by human institutions like banks. Crypto, like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and so forth, is a post-human currency produced by algorithms. The people who say, I don't trust dollar, I trust Bitcoin, what they actually say is, I don't trust humans, I trust algorithms. I don't trust the humans who run the banks, I prefer to trust the algorithms who run the cryptocurrency networks. Now, and this you see in more and more areas. Also, you know, you talked about bureaucracy earlier. So you see at the same time that Elon Musk and Donald Trump, they are firing tens of thousands of human bureaucrats, but they are not really against bureaucracy because they simply replace them with digital bureaucrats, with algorithms. And this is the shift in power from humans to algorithms. When it comes to stories, this is where social media is most relevant. That previously all the stories that circulated in the world, they came from the human mind, and it was human editors who decided what stories will dominate the conversation. Like you have a newspaper or you have a TV station, so you have a human editor going over all the stories that were published today and say, oh, this is the most important story, we'll publish this on the front page. And everybody reads this and talk about it. Now this job too is done by an algorithm. If you ask who are the most important editors in the world right now, they are the editors of TikTok and Facebook and Twitter, and they are not human. They are algorithms. So the stories are being produced by and spread by non-human intelligence to maintain in human trust and cooperation. I think that it's not a complete solution, of course, but the first and simplest thing every government should do is pass a law banning fake humans. Banning counterfeit humans. The same way there is a law that bans counterfeit money. You cannot just print yens and pretend this is real. No, you can't. Same thing with human beings. Until today, you couldn't create fake humans. Now you can. Bots can pretend to be humans. Much of the traffic in places like TikTok and like X Twitter is run by bots that pretend to be human beings. So the first and simplest step to take, have a very strict law. You cannot fake humans. AIs are welcome to talk with us on condition that they identify as an AI. If somebody tries to fake humans, or if a platform doesn't take action against fake humans, they should go to jail. The same way that if somebody has a printing press or print shop and people there try to print yens, what will happen to the owner of the print shop? He goes to jail. It should be the same thing, even worse, with trying to fake humans.
Thank you. 追加で何かありますか？
すいません。2点目なんですけど、それこそ今その偽情報とかがこう流通している一方で、その今先ほどおっしゃられたその人間間の信頼をこう回復するというか確立するためのルールというものもおそらくフィクションであると思うんですが、そしてそのネクサスにおいてもそのフィクションによる秩序の安定とその真実の追求のバランスが重要であるというふうにおっしゃっていたと思いますが、その真実の追求によって修正されるべきフィクション、そのフェイクニュースのようなフィクションとその 維持されるべき社会の安定化に寄与するようなフィクションの区別というのはいかにできるというふうに考えておられるかお聞かせください。お願いします。
When it comes to fake news and disinformation and all that, we need to differentiate between freedom of speech and freedom of information. Freedom of speech is given to human beings. It's a human right, a very important human right, which should be protected. Whether it is here in this hall, whether it is on TikTok or Facebook or anywhere else, human beings, except in extreme situations, should have the right to express their views without fear of being punished for it. This should be protected. Freedom of information is something very different. It's a new right which is given not to human beings, it's given to AIs and algorithms and bots. When a lot of the social media giants, they intentionally confuse the two rights. The problem on social media is not that human beings invent lies. Human beings have been inventing lies for thousands of years. Except in extreme circumstances, they should not be punished. But the problem is that then you have an algorithm that decides to deliberately spread lies and hate and so forth. And this should be stopped, and this should be punished. Again, it's not if I'm a user on YouTube and I created a fake news video, I should not be punished for it. But if I'm the company and I deliberately recommend and play this hate-filled conspiracy theory to millions of people because I make money out of it, this should be punished. And this is not protected by freedom of speech because this is done by algorithms, and algorithms don't have rights. They don't have a right to spread lies. It is the job of the social media companies, the same way it's the job of newspapers and TV stations, before they disseminate something, to make sure that it is the truth and it is not some hate-filled lies.
はい、ありがとうございます。
ありがとうございました。
憲法の研究者としてはいろいろとコメントしたいところもありますけれども、はい、次に行きたいと思います。いかがでしょうか。じゃあどうですかね。はい、そうです。
はい、さまざまな問題に、触れた、とても示唆に富んだ、対談ありがとうございました。私からは先ほどご対談の中でもあった AI と戦争についてのご質問させていただきたいです。従来国家の有する財産というのは、天然資源などの有形の富でした。しかし現在ではデータやテクノロジーを用いた無形の知識へと変化していると思います。で AI を用いたサイバー戦争は、そういった後者を舞台にしていますが、それでも現在起こっているロシア・ウクライナ戦争のように爆撃をしたり生身の人間を殺害する人為的なカタストロフは終わっておりません。この先いくら高知能の AI が発達したとしても、憎悪の感情を持つ人間が存在する限り、そういった戦争の残虐性というのは残り続けてしまうのでしょうか。
Yeah, I mean, the physical world is still there. I mean, none of the development of information technology abolishes the physical world. It's another layer built on top of it. This has been, if you go back thousands of years, so all the information created by humans, whether it's laws and constitutions, whether it's religion, whether it's money, it did not replace or abolish the physical and biological reality. People still have bodies, they need to eat, they need clean water, but all this additional layer of stories, it enabled people to create things like trade networks that changed the way we get food. Like 100,000 years ago, you're hungry, You go to the forest, to the savannah, to the sea, you fish, you hunt, you gather fruits, you eat. Now, very few people do that. Almost everybody depends on a global trade network which is managed by information in order to get their food. So the same is likely to happen with AI, whether it's in peace or in war. War ultimately is still about killing people. But the way it is done is changing. What we saw in recent wars, not just in the Russian invasion of Ukraine, also I know it more from the war in my country between Israelis and Palestinians. A lot of people expected AI to change war by doing the actual shooting. Like people watched all these Hollywood movies about killer robots. So they now look on television and they don't see killer robots. The killing is still done by human beings. What really changed already with AI is who is choosing the targets, who is making the decisions. Who decided to bomb this building? Who decided to bomb this person? And increasingly the answer is AI. That this is something that happened really over the last 2-3 years. Previously, the job of identifying targets was done by human intelligence officers. They would gather all this information and start reading all these reports, and it would take them days to say, oh, this building, this is enemy headquarters, bomb it. Now it's done in seconds by AI. AI goes over enormous amounts of information that no human being can analyze. It spots patterns that no human being is able to spot, and within seconds says, this is enemy headquarters, bomb it.
But statistical probability, right?
With statistical probability and with a lot of other computer, very complex mathematical models. Of course, the big question is, can we believe the AI? Maybe it made a mistake. Maybe it told us to bomb a building which is civilian, not military. And I talk with different people, they tell me different stories. Some people say, oh, after the AI points to a target, we get human analysts to go over all the information and make sure there is no mistake.
Right.
Other people say, nah, the human analysts spend something like half a minute. Nobody can really check the AI. It goes over so many data points. So basically, they're just rubber stamp. And the one making the decision is AI. Now, I don't know, probably it's sometimes like this, sometimes like this. But looking to the future, 5 years, 10 years in the future, it's very clear what the trend is. That increasingly the AI will be making the key decisions in warfare, and this is, of course, a very dangerous development.
Thank you. 他いかがでしょうか。じゃあすみません。すみません。なんか全員当てられないとは思うんですが、すみません。
私からは反科学主義の思想についての質問をさせていただきたいと思っています。ホモデウスの文庫版の寄稿においても、ハラリ先生がおっしゃられていたように、コロナウイルスのワクチンの開発がとても大きなテクノロジーの発展だったとおっしゃっていました。それに対して反ワクチン派の思想や、それは陰謀論であるといった思想も多く見受けられました。それはフェイクニュースの話でもあると思うのですが、人類がこれまでやってきたような科学的に対する抵抗とか反発が見受けられるようなものでもあると思います。ハラリ先生がおっしゃっている AI が統制する世の中に対しても同じような反発が起きると思うのですが、そのような反科学的な思想に対してどのような具体的影響が得られるか、またそれに対してどのような対策を講じるべきかお聞かせいただきたいです。お願いします。
Conspiracy theories are not something new. They have been around throughout history. This is related to what we mentioned earlier of a key difference between truth and fiction is the truth is complicated, fiction is simple. When there is something like a big pandemic that changes so many things, the truth of the pandemic is very complicated. Simply to understand what a virus is. A virus is such a strange thing. Humans, for most of history, never knew that viruses existed. Only in the last century, we really began to understand what viruses are. And the strange thing about them is that they are not exactly alive and not exactly not alive. There is a huge debate in the scientific community. Are viruses a form of life? Or are they part of biology? Or are they actually just some chemical information? Because a virus cannot reproduce by itself. A virus doesn't eat. It's not like a bacteria that eats things and reproduces. A virus is really just a bit of information. And the amazing ability of this bit of genetic code is to get into the cells of my body and tell my own body, my own cells, to start producing more copies of that code. So you start with one code, one line of code. It takes over a cell in my body. You get 1 million copies of that code. They spread to other cells. They tell the other cells, produce more copies of that code. This is how it goes viral. And this is such a strange thing. We don't see things like that happening on our level of reality. It's happening on a very, very small level of reality. So to understand how a pandemic begins and spreads, very complicated. It's much easier to believe a conspiracy theory. Oh, there is a group of very powerful people. They created this pandemic to take over the world. The one thing I can say as a historian is that these types of conspiracies are always wrong for the simple reason the world is too complicated for any small number of people to really understand it and manipulate it. The level of manipulation that conspiracy theories usually assume is completely unrealistic. You look at how governments, even if you have a government with all the power of a government that tries to do something, very often it fails. Like, I don't know, the Americans decide to invade Iraq. They are the strongest country in the world. They have all this military power, and they fail. Yes, they manage to conquer Iraq. Then everything goes off plan. And eventually it's Iran that becomes the main beneficiary, the victor of the war. So the Americans had one plan, something completely different happened. This is how the actual world functions. And conspiracy theories, they are usually this kind of wishful thinking that the world is a very simple place. If a couple of people in a room can plan to take over the world and then they just do it. It never happens.
Okay, thank you very much. 大丈夫ですか？はい。じゃあ、他の方いかがでしょうか？じゃあ、ちょっと前の方で、じゃあ、お願いします。
はじめまして。私からはAI と娯楽、人間の娯楽についてお聞きしたいです。そもそも今の社会ってSNS が発達していて、YouTube だったり X だったり TikTok だったりそういうのを見て人間が楽しさを得る社会じゃないですか。でそんな中でハラリ先生もおっしゃってるように人間がエリートと非エリートでより格差が拡大してしまう。で私としてはそのエリートと非エリートでなんか娯楽の形がより変化していってしまうのではないかなと思ったんですけど、ハラリー先生は今後の娯楽とか楽しみの形と意義、それはどう変化していくとお考えでしょうか？
Can you just say how what will exactly change?
ハラリ先生は今後の娯楽の、形そして意義 がどう変化するとお考えか。
And we don't know, we can't predict, but it's very clear that more and more both the form and the content of entertainment will come from AI and not from human beings. Previously in history, all entertainment, whether it's poetry or theater, television, movies, everything came out of the human mind, of the human imagination. Now we have something on the planet that is capable of producing such things, perhaps certainly far more cheaply than human beings and far more efficiently, and also break out of the limitations of the human imagination. Because the human imagination is limited by the human brain, by our own biological limitations. AI isn't. So to take an example from a slightly different area, like the game of Go, in 2016 there was this very famous game between AlphaGo, an AI, and Lee Sedol, one of the Go world champion. And AlphaGo won. It was one of the decisive moments in the AI revolution. But the amazing thing about the game wasn't just that AlphaGo defeated the human world champion, it's the way he did it. It came up with strategies that were completely alien. That, humans have been playing Go in East Asia for thousands of years. It was invented more than 2,000 years ago. Tens of millions of people played Go. It was considered a form of art, not just a game. Entire philosophies developed around how to play Go, and yet, all those years, all those people, nobody ever thought of playing Go like AlphaGo. So you can imagine it like a landscape, like a planet Go, all the different ways to play Go. And humans have been stuck on one island in planet Go, and they thought this was the whole planet. For 2,000 years, they thought these are the only ways to play Go. They couldn't leave this mental island because our minds are limited. Then AlphaGo came and said, look, you can play like this, you can play like this, discovered entire new areas on the planet Go. The same thing is likely to happen in music, in painting, in theater, in television. It's already happening. So many people are now playing with using AI to create videos. And this is just the very beginning of the process. If you think the AIs of today are sophisticated, it's nothing compared to what we will have in 10 years. So, like other fields, also at entertainment will change completely. And it's impossible to predict in what ways, because, and this is the nature of AI, is that it's an alien form of intelligence. So human intelligence cannot predict what the alien intelligence will do. If you can predict everything the AI is going to do, it's not an AI. It's just some automatic machine. Like if you have a coffee machine, and you can predict everything the coffee machine will do. I press this button, it makes espresso. This is an automatic machine. It is not an AI. When is it an AI? When you press a button, or you don't even press any button. You just approach the machine, and the machine tells you, hey, I just invented this morning a new drink that I think you would like better than coffee, and I made you a cup. Then it's an AI.
Thank you. じゃあ他いかがでしょうか。じゃあそこの方とかいかがでしょう。はい、
対談ありがとうございました。私はAI がある社会の中で人間がどのように合意を取っていくかっていうことについてご質問したいんですけれども、まずAI っていうものは人間が使用するインターネットの利便性というものをとても高めていると思います。で、そういうふうになっていくと人間と先ほどもお話しされていたようなそのエリートとそうでない人とのその 隔絶っていうものがとても大きくなっていって、それとともにやっぱり価値観の多様化っていうものも大きくなっていくと思います。そうすると先ほどもおっしゃられていたようなその正しい情報っていうのが必ずしも出回るようにはなくなってしまっていって、その正しい情報を知っている人っていうのがその数的なマジョリティになり得ないっていう状態がかなり主流になっていくんじゃないかっていうふうに考えてはいるんですけれども、そういった社会の中で人間はどのように合意を取っていくべきだとお考えですか。お聞かせください。
Yeah, so as I said, I agree. This is the biggest question: how to reach agreement between humans in an era when communication between humans is being twisted and manipulated by the new information technology. I don't know. That's and I was asked earlier, what is the research project? If I knew the answer, no need of research project. Because we already have the answer. I think one of the most important thing in science is to admit ignorance. For me, the scientific revolution, looking back in history, was a revolution of ignorance, not of knowledge. Before science, every human group, every human culture said, we already know everything. Everything is in the holy books, or our holy men and sometimes holy women know everything. No need of new research. The scientific revolution was about people coming and saying, we don't know. We really want to know this, the answer to this question, and we don't know what it is. Oh, so we need to do research. And this is still the case right now. So again, if you ask him what is the most important research subject, not just for the research center here, but generally, I would say this is the research subject. And to like really kind of focus it, it's not a general question about how to establish trust between humans. It's how to establish trust between humans when they mostly communicate through this new technology of the digital infrastructure, of computers and social media and AI, and everything we thought we learned about building trust over thousands of years is coming into question. And we need more scientists, more scholars, more researchers focusing on that issue.
I think Professor Yamamoto and his colleagues will conduct this as a Yuval Harari project within the center. So you're welcome to join the center.
Yes, please. じゃあ他いかがでしょうか。じゃあちょっと真ん中のそちらの方お願いできますか。
とても興味深いお話を聞かせていただきありがとうございます。理工学部の学生として1点、ハラリ氏に質問させてください。その高度に技術だったり知見だったりが専門化された学術領域において、その一種のエコーチェンバー現象のようなものは、往々にして、生じるかと思います。で、ハラリ氏の執筆したネクサスでも、そのに関してはそのパブリッシュアペリッシュ、つまり出版可視化っていうような観点から、可能性は低いであろうというふうにおっしゃられていたかと思いますが、神経科学を私自身専攻している身として、その科学っていうのは従来の、常識っていうのを、打ち破って新たに再定義する、ことも重要であるっていうふうに考えています。でこの意味でその、このもしその将来これから出てくる AI っていうのがそのエージェントとして、その働くというのであれば、その人間が、これまで、リードしてきた研究に対して AI がリードする研究っていうのはそのようなエコーチェンバー現象がより起こりやすくなっていくのか、それともそのままなのか、もしくは起こりづらくなっていくのかということに関して、ご意見を聞かせていただきたいと思います。
Yeah, AI is now revolutionizing scientific research, as you said. We just saw Nobel Prizes, 2 Nobel Prizes in physics and in chemistry actually go to AI. I was especially amazed by the AI Nobel Prize in chemistry, which was given to the developers of AlphaFold. And I mean, they're brilliant people. I'm not sure they are chemists. I mean, they needed deep understanding of chemistry to develop AlphaFold, of course, but their background is not in chemistry. But their creation completely changed chemistry and will change biology and will change medicine production by solving this huge scientific puzzle of predicting how proteins fold. Now, what this tells us is not just that AI will become better than humans in more and more scientific areas, but that it will be able, as you said, to break the barriers. Humans have a limited capacity. Like I study history for many years, I don't have time to study physics deeply or to study chemistry deeply. This is why we have this division in the university. This is the physics department, this is history department. You can't do both. For AI, there is no limitation like that. So in a way, AI could bring a much more holistic approach to science. Maybe not AlphaFold, maybe not the AI of today, but the AI of 10 years from now. You can have an AI network which understands very deeply chemistry and economics and history and can combine data and models from all these very different disciplines. And it will, the question then becomes, so what would be the role of humans in such a situation? And again, we don't know. I mean, given the pace of development and the potential, it's not clear. What would be still, what could humans contribute to research in 10 or 20 years?
Thank you very much. じゃあすみません、時間そろそろ来ているのですが、最後の質問にしたいと思いますが、じゃあそちらの方でいかがですか。ちょっとはい。じゃあ一つだけにしていただければと思います。はい、わかりました。僕からは、コンピューター間のインターサブジェクティブリアリティについて、質問させていただきたいと思います。ネクサスの中でコンピューターの間のインターサブジェクティブリアリティ、あるいはコンピューターと我々の間のインターサブジェクティブリアリティっていうのが今後増えていくと書かれていたと思います。で、そうした現実は私たちにとってはとても複雑で、そして異質であるがゆえにとても理解しづらいものであるになると予想されていました。しかし、それがたとえ異質であるからといっても、あるいは異質であるがゆえに私たちはそれを理解するように努力し続けると、僕は思いますし、そうした理解しようとする鋭意こそがその AI の暴走を食い止めるというか、その手段の一つになりうると思っています。で、その歴史を振り返ったときに、そのネクサスの中にもありましたが、例えば聖書にするとか、あるいはそうした書物にする、あるいはその神様の像を作るであるとか、聖人のイコンを作るであるとか、物化すると、現実を物化するというのが、そうしたその現実を多くの人が理解しやすくするような手段の一つであると思っていますし、それは現在でもそのディズニーランドでミッキーマウスの着ぐるみが動いているっていうのは、その特に子どもたちにとってはその架空のキャラクターが現実にあるんだというその現実性っていうのを分かりやすく示す手段の一つだと思います。で、そうした中でそうした観点で見るときにコンピューター間のインターサブジェクティブリアリティといったものをそのビジブルでタンジブルな形に表現するためには、どういった手段があるだろうとお考えになられますか。
Yeah, I'm afraid I again have to say that I don't really know, that this is again one of these frontiers of knowledge and research which we should invest in. Maybe I take an example now from economics. I talked earlier about money being the most successful story ever invented. Money is not an objective reality. It has no objective value. You can't eat it. Most money in the world is not even coins and paper notes. It's just information in computers. But money is now undergoing a revolution with the rise of cryptocurrencies. The next revolution might be the appearance of money that only computers understand. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, they are produced by algorithms, but their value still depends on the belief of human beings. When Trump gets elected, value of Bitcoin goes up because humans believe, oh, Trump will deregulate crypto, so I better invest in Bitcoin, and then more people think like that, and the value of Bitcoin goes up. So it's still human belief that is the basis for the value of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. The next step is for digital currencies whose value depends only on the beliefs of AIs and algorithms. Even today, a large part of the trade in the world, especially trade in bonds and stocks and foreign exchange, it's just algorithms trading with other algorithms. And especially if humans deregulate the financial markets, which is what the Trump administration is all about, so we are likely to see new financial devices, new kinds of money, which only AIs understand, and AIs trade with other AIs. And what happens in a world when humans no longer understand finance? This can happen in 10 years or so. Like, think about it think about horses and money. People have been buying and selling horses for money for thousands of years, but the horses never understood what was happening. The horse could see that, say, one samurai is giving some piece of shiny metal to a merchant and gets me, the horse, in return. But what was happening there? What is this worthless piece of metal? The horses never understood money. Only humans understood them, which is why we control the horses and not vice versa. In 10 years, our life could be managed by financial transactions between algorithms that we can't understand. That whether we get a loan to buy a house will be decided by algorithms talking with algorithms in a financial language which is unintelligible to human beings. Not because we didn't go to college or but simply because it's mathematically, the algorithms can have mathematical models of the economy which are too complicated for the organic human brain. What is the meaning, say, for democracies if not even the prime minister or the finance minister understand finance anymore? There is a financial crisis, but no human being understands why there is a financial crisis and what can be done about it. And it's not just a problem for democracies, also for dictatorships. The biggest fear of every dictator in history is to have a subordinate that becomes more powerful than me. Like if you're Putin or if you're Kim, your biggest fear, the thing that keeps you up at night, is maybe the defense minister is plotting against me. Maybe some army general will have a coup and kill me, take my place. That's the biggest fear. And so for them, if AI becomes so powerful that I can no longer understand the AI, it's a threat even to human dictators. So this is a kind of intersubjective computer reality which we are likely to see very soon, especially if we deregulate financial markets. Again, the same way that a government can have a law, no fake humans, AIs can't pretend to be humans. Governments can also regulate financial markets. No, all financial devices that are tradable in the market must be vetted by humans. We don't allow. But with the current trend, we are likely to see a post-human financial system very soon. And if there is a big financial crisis in the post-human financial system, the humans will suffer greatly.
Thank you very much. それはちょっと時間が来ましたので、学生からのご質問はここまでとしたいと思います。今日は慶應義塾の一貫校の生徒さんたちも学生さんいらっしゃったということですけど、おそらく当てられなかったのではないかなというふうに思っています。お詫びを申し上げたいというふうに思います。それではですね、ここで質疑応答、それから今日のシンポジウムはここまでとしたいと思います。本当にハラリさん、学生の質問非常に誠実にお答えいただきましてありがとうございます。それから伊藤さんも非常にディスカッション、素晴らしいディスカッションありがとうございました。じゃあお二人に盛大な拍手をお願いいたします。
Thank you.
.では最後にハラリ教授から本日の対談と質疑応答のご感想と学生へのメッセージを頂戴したいと思います。Professor Harari, in closing, please could you give us your thoughts on today's talk and Q&A sessions and a message to the students?
Oh, closing remarks. So there is a lot to think about. There is a lot to research. Again, the key thing, many of the things we talked about sound very frightening. Part of the problem is you have the people who, in the companies that develop the AI, that talk about all the positive potential of AI. So to balance it, you need philosophers and historians and critics who say, wait a minute, there are also dangers. So I find myself in occasions like this talking mainly about the dangers. But of course, there is also enormous positive potential. Otherwise, nobody would develop the technology in fields ranging from medicine to preventing catastrophic climate change. And it's definitely there. There is enormous positive potential. The question is not how to stop the development of AI. This is unrealistic and undesired. We want to develop it. We just want to do it in a safe way. And here, again, the key is to build trust between human beings. There is a lot that every person can do in your specific field. So, sometimes people feel crushed by the weight of the world that, all these problems, how can we... So don't feel like the whole world is just on your shoulders. There are more than 8 billion other humans on the planet. So they share in this weight of holding the planet. And of course, there are not just humans. There are also animals and plants and other organisms. And each one doing their small little thing. When I think about trust, which was maybe the major theme of our meeting, maybe I would leave you with the following thought, that trust is really the foundation of life, in the sense that if you don't trust others, if you don't trust what is outside you, you cannot live for a single minute. Because even the air we breathe, like this simple movement that sustains life, the breath, what is it? It is trusting in what is outside us. You have all these people today, including the most powerful people in the world, that they want to be separate. All they think about is separating things, building barriers and borders and walls. And actually, complete separation is death. Every moment, we have this simple gesture of trust in what is outside us. We open our mouth or our nose, and we take in something from the outside. We have trust in it. And then we give it back. And this is the in and out movement of trust that sustains life. If you don't trust what is outside you, and you just block your mouth and your nose, you die within a minute or two. So yeah, I know there is a lot of reason for anxiety, for fear. It's real. It's not imaginary. There are huge problems in the world. But ultimately, the basis of life is trust. Thank you. Thank you.